and welcome to Whiskytower TV.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself to our viewers.
Okay, so my name is David Lind. I work for the Loch Lomond group. We have two distilleries, the Loch Lomond distillery in the Highlands and the Glen Scotia distillery in Campbelltown. And I've worked in the whisky business now for around 20 years. So I'm a very lucky guy. All day I get to talk about whisky, read and write about whisky, drink whisky. So I'm a very fortunate guy. And I've worked for Loch Lomond for about 4 years now. And I do a lot of the brand ambassador work, whisky tasting work. And I've got a commercial role as well within the company to look after Europe, Greater Europe.
How do you got into the business? What's the story?
Yeah, well, I got in. I studied statistics at university, right? And that doesn't make you attractive to women at all. So I wanted to move into something more windswept and interesting. So I moved into marketing and specifically brand planning. Using my numerical knowledge, and I started doing a lot of market research, and it led to brand planning. And my first role within the industry was as a business analyst for Glenmorangie, which I'm sure you guys are aware of. So I worked there for a while. Then I traveled to Asia and was based in Singapore for an agency, not for Glenmorangie, but for an agency working on different drinks brands. And then I came back and I worked for another whiskey company called Intervju Distillers. Yeah. And they have Old Pulteney, Speyburn, Balblair, Anok. And I worked for them for a long time, and I was based again in Asia and then also the US. And I was keen to come home to Scotland, where I am now in Glasgow. And I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to start with Loch Lomond, as I say, about 4 years ago. So that's my potted history.
Yeah. Your Loch Lomond is releasing a single malt heavily peated in Sweden on the 1st of December.
That's right, yes.
What can you tell us about this one? It's a non-age statement, I see.
Yes, it was in response to a tender, so we submitted and we were lucky enough to win the tender. And you guys probably are aware of the distillation capability at Loch Lomond, but we have different shapes of still, and we can make different styles of whiskey. So we make peated whiskey and unpeated whiskey. We also make heavier whiskey in what we call our traditional swan neck stills, but we have straight neck stills that can make, again, different lighter styles of whiskey, and we can create different flavors using these distillation techniques. So that makes us very versatile as a whiskey producer. And the reason I tell you that story is the Loch Lomond peated, they're heavily peated. It uses a combination of whiskies from our straight neck still, which is the tall one, and then also our swan neck still, which is the traditional pot still shape. So it's a combination of those style of whiskies, and that really brings out slightly different phenols, different phenol content. So the pot still tends to bring the more medicinal phenols. The sort of, the iodine, the salt, the seaweed, the bacon, those type of heavier phenols. And we have in the straight neck still, we have a lighter style, and that tends to bring out that lovely a lovely sweet smoke and a lovely sort of fruity smoke flavour. So the whiskey itself, it's about 85% from the straight neck still and about 15% from the pot still. Both of those spirits are made using peated malted barley, heavily peated malted barley. They are matured separately in American oak and then blended back together again after the maturation process. And we created what we think is an excellent heavily peated single malt, and we feel that it's got all of those big, smoky, medicinal, bacon, seaweed, salt, all of these lovely smoky phenols that we all love. But at the same time, it's got a little more depth and character. It's not just peat. It's not just smoke. There's a lovely sort of fruitiness to it as well, and a lovely sweetness from the bourbon barrels. It's all matured in ex-bourbon barrels. So that, in a nutshell, is the liquid story itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does. I'd like to ask you, you make many kinds of new make at Loch Lomond. You said you have the straight neck and the pot still, and you have different recipes. At least earlier you have the Loch Lomond, the Inchmurrin, Inchfad, Inchmoan, and some others as well. Are you moving away from those brands and just focusing on the Loch Lomond brand? Because if I visit the webpage, it appears to me that you're focusing on the Loch Lomond brand.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and let me tell you, I'll explain that briefly. The history, I mean, Loch Lomond has been making whiskey for 200 years, so we've been making whiskey for a long time, and a lot of that, we have one of only 7 grain distilleries at Loch
I know.
Lomond. Yeah. We have our own cooperage, so it's quite an interesting place, and we've always, I think the background in making blended Scotch was what drove the business initially to be able to create a capability that can produce many different styles of single malt. So that really came about to service a blended whiskey business. Then in 2014, the business was taken over by a new management team, and they came in. They tasted the whiskies and they said, we really want to be focusing more on the single malt opportunity and less on just the UK market and more on export markets. So they developed the portfolio, and they introduced Inchmurrin to the market, sort of Inchmoan, Croftingia, all of these different styles. And what we found is that's been wonderful to create the awareness of the capability at Loch Lomond and what we can do. So that was really a good thing to do. However, what we found is that as we grow and get bigger, some people are sort of getting confused as to, is Inchmurrin, is that an Inchmurrin distillery? Inchmoan, is that the Inchmoan distillery? And it's tended to cause a little bit of confusion. So what we've done is, we've refreshed and edited the packaging and the website and the other communication elements, and we've made it first and foremost about Loch Lomond. Yeah. So it is about the brand Loch Lomond. Now we will still make and offer Inchmurrin 12. In fact, it's listed in Systembolaget, so we'll continue to offer that, and it's a great product. What the difference will be is that rather than say Inchmurrin, as at the forefront of the labelling, it will say Loch Lomond, and then the sub-brand will be Inchmurrin, and we'll talk much more about the sweet, fruity flavours in Inchmurrin and the fact that it's unpeated and so on. So what we're trying to do is be more, to make more sense to the consumer. And therefore we've made the dominant branding all about Loch Lomond, the distillery, where all these whiskies are made, and we've reduced the emphasis on the packaging of the Inchmurrin name, because it's very much a style of whiskey that's made at Loch Lomond, and that's really the big shift that we've seen.
That's true.
I have a bottle here of High Commissioner that's made at Loch Lomond. That is not on your webpage either. But instead you have Loch Lomond blended whiskey. And a question about this one. Is all the liquid made at Loch Lomond? And if it is, it's a single blended whiskey.
Indeed, yeah, that's right. I mean, The first thing is it should be on the website. I think we've got a corporate website and a Loch Lomond only website. Yeah. So I think we should be on the corporate website. It's the largest blended whiskey that we have. So it will be on there. So yes, it's a single blended whiskey, and we just can't say that anymore. It's no longer a definition that's accepted by the SWA, by the Scottish Whisky Association. And we've come up against this. And I respect the SWA and that they have these rules to make things easier to understand. But we have a Loch Lomond blended whiskey, for example, and all of the whiskey is made at Loch Lomond, and it has to be, because we've put a distillery name on there, and all of the whiskey, that if you put a distillery name on there, all of the whiskey in the bottle has to be made at that distillery. So Loch Lomond blended whiskey is by definition a single blend whiskey, and it used to be called that many years ago, but since the laws have changed, we can no longer call it a single blend, but it is, as you say, a single blend. And what's interesting as well is we have a product that we call single grain, and it's made from 100% malted barley, but it's made in our small coffee still. So even though it's made at a single distillery from 100% malted barley, which is by definition that single malt, but single malt must be a batch process or a pot still.
In Scotland.
Sorry?
In Scotland. Not in the rest of the world.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely, in Scotland. And therefore, under the Scottish law, the rules, we must call that a single grain. And again, we've had discussions with the SWA, the Scotch Whisky Association, to perhaps be able to label that in a more meaningful way, but we haven't. We still have to call it a single grain to fit under the guidelines. So that's the challenge, I think, with the industry. You have to innovate, but at the same time, you must comply with the rules to help consumer understanding and to ensure that everything that's communicated on packaging is correct and lawful.
I think that your single grain is. I love it. I think it's a lovely whiskey.
It's nice of you to say that. Thank you. There's one thing, we've just introduced a peated version of that.
Okay.
I saw that on your webpage.
Right. Okay. I think I've maybe got a bottle here actually. A quick trip to my drinks cabinet.
Yeah.
It's never far away.
Close to the office.
And this is I'm working in my office, so that's the peated single grain.
Ah, you see.
Which is nice, and I think I think it is the only peated single grain, or certainly that I can think of. So it's quite a unique product.
I suspect you're right. I've never heard about the peated single grain.
No.
I think it is. So yeah.
Let's hope we see it in Sweden.
I hope so.
Har du mer frågor?
Do you have any news you can reveal for us coming up from Loch Lomond?
We tasted the 21 and the 30-year-old a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's great. That was part of my news. The 30-year-old sold out very quickly. Unfortunately, I think it was 4 minutes or something. It sold out. So that's great.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people maybe didn't get some. So I'm glad you guys got a hold of it. Yeah, I mean, we refreshed the packaging as I mentioned to you, and at the same time we introduced a 21, a 30. We also have a 14 years old. Which is a very interesting product as well. And again, that's not available in Sweden just yet. But if you would keep your eye out for the 14-year-old, it's further matured in virgin limousine oak, and it brings a lovely sort of spice to it to really complement the fruit. So you got a lovely kind of sort of spiced apple to it, which is really nice. So that's an interesting product. I think I've maybe got that looking into. Yeah. So, So
this
is the 14-year-old as well, which is good. I've only had a little bit of this one.
Yeah.
So that's the 14, and we've got a couple of interesting higher age products. We've got a good stock profile at Loch Lomond, and we've got some pockets of really older whiskies.
Mm-hmm.
We launched a 50-year-old a couple of years ago, and we're looking at a 45-year-old coming out at the beginning of next year, which will be really, really interesting. And it's part of what we call our Remarkable Stills series. And again, we're using these bottlings to showcase the different types of whiskies that we can produce at Loch Lomond. So we've got a 45-year-old in January, I think. And then we have a 1988 vintage Armagnac finish. And that's going to be around about April, May time, later in the year. So we've got a couple of interesting older variants. In terms of other products, we don't have too much else coming out. What we're doing is because we've just relaunched the range, and we've added the peated grain and the 14-year-old and the 21 and the 30. So we feel that that's quite a lot already.
Yes.
So our focus next year will just be to really continue to embed that and sort of make people aware of these products before we introduce too much more. But we do, as I say, have a couple of interesting super premium products coming in at that higher age.
That's nice. Looking forward.
And the news from Glen Scotia, when we have you online. We've actually visited Glen Scotia once.
Yes.
Lovely distillery.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, when were you there? When was the last time you were there?
2016, I think.
Yeah, I think it's
2016, so quite recently.
Yeah.
I think if you'd been before that, there's been a huge transformation since.
And you had to visit the distillery.
The new Whisky Center was there then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So yeah. I think the news really on Glen Scotia is that we are introducing next year's just 2 limited editions.
Mm-hmm.
Every year we have what we call a festival edition.
Yeah.
And the Campbelltown Festival, if you guys are coming over, coming at the end of May for the festival, is a good time to come. It's not anywhere near as big and busy as the Isla Festival. As you can imagine, Campbelltown's still relatively undiscovered. Yeah. So it's nice to experience the music and the food and the atmosphere, but you get really lots of access to the distillery and the distillery manager, and you can go into the warehouse and do a single cask tasting and everything, actually dipping the cask at the warehouse and everything. Mm-hmm. So it's a really wonderful experience, and it's still, as I say, relatively undiscovered. So you don't have the crowds that you do maybe elsewhere. So in 2018, we launched the first festival edition that was available for export, and that was the Ruby Port. So it was a Ruby Port finish. Then in 2019 we had the Guyana rum cask finish in 2019, and in 2020 for the first time we had the festival edition available in Sweden.
Yes, we tried it.
We tried it.
Which is great. That was the 14-year-old Tawny Port, right?
Peated.
Yeah. Peated, the peated one. What did you guys think?
I liked it.
I liked it too.
I like Glen Scotia's whiskies.
Yeah. Great. So what we've got is we'll have the festival edition coming in May again next year, and I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you actually what the finish is. So
you can email us.
Let me check if I'm allowed to, because I don't want the marketing guys to.
No problem.
Let me double check that. But it's going to be another new finish, a new style, and I'll check with them and email you the answer if I'm allowed. And what we're also introducing is we're going to have another limited edition that comes a seasonal edition that comes every winter. And this year we had what we called a double sherry, an 11-year-old double sherry that was further matured. It was unpeated, and it was further matured in a combination of Oloroso and PX casks. And I think I've got this. This is unbelievable. You guys are going to think I've got all these whiskies. And we've just spoken about the right ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the 11-year-old double sherry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with the combination of the Oloroso and the PX, you get that lovely sort of spice and toffee, but you get that lovely floral perfume from the Oloroso as well, and really, really nice. And that salty, oily Campbelltown character. So we'll have a seasonal edition next year as well, and I hope that'll be coming to Sweden also. So that's 2 limited editions to look forward to next year, the festival edition, and then the 2021 seasonal edition, which will be Christmassy in style and flavour, I would imagine. So that's and I'll check if I can give you the more information on that and email you.
Nice.
Yeah. Har du några mer frågor?
We used to, when we interview someone, we would like you to, can you give us some whiskey advice to our viewers? Do you want to say something to our viewers at the end?
Yeah, I guess whiskey's personal.
Yeah.
And we all like different styles of whiskey, different flavors of whiskey. I think the one thing I would say about Scotch over the last few years is, or single malt in particular, the demand was ahead of the supply.
Yeah.
Remember there was a time when a lot of the age statements were coming off, and I think that's forced whiskey producers to think about more than just age, and focus in terms of different styles of distillate, different maturation styles. And I think, although it was a difficult time for the industry, I think it's in a stronger place as a result. And I would urge your drinkers to look beyond age statements and actually get more interested in the how the whiskey's distilled, the peat levels, the maturation style, and just to explore that, because I've tasted a lot of really good young whiskies and a lot of really bad old whiskies, and I think age is an indicator of quality for sure, but it's not a guarantee, and therefore I always think that we should look beyond age. And I think giving that advice to a Swedish consumer is probably quite basic, because Sweden is quite very advanced in terms of its whiskey knowledge, generally speaking. But so it's probably advice I would give to other countries perhaps before Sweden. But I think it's still a good thing to bear in mind, is it's not just about an age statement. And we started the discussion talking about the peated, heavily peated that's launching in Sweden, and there's no age statement on that. But some of the whiskies in there are 10 years old, and it's how those whiskies are blended together with the younger whiskies, and don't allow a lack of age statement to make you not want to try the whiskey. It's not just about age, it's about wood quality and the whiskies that are blended together. So that would be my advice, I think, if I was.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, David. And
thanks for having me.
We hope to see you maybe in Gothenburg.
If I'm allowed to travel, I'll certainly be there.
Yeah, you were supposed to be last year at Gothenburg when it was cancelled.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And as I say, I was meant to be in Sweden this week, and that had to be cancelled as well. So when things open up and improve for all of us, I'll be there, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.